Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 2 episode number 25 based on novel. So let's start. Ju Yuan still spent the majority of his time here training, while naturally blocking off the various matters and happenings of the outside world. All of his attention was placed on mastering the ethereal form technique. It was the 5th day since he borrowed the jade strip. Although these 5 days were short, they were unbelievable enriching to Ju Yuan. In these short 5 days, he had unblocked 30 of the 108 apertures. Only 6 remained till he reached the first level. When that happened, the true wonders of the ethereal form technique would begin to be revealed. Atop the rock, Ju Yuan opened his eyes, mist gathering within them before gradually disappearing as a satisfied smile appeared from the corners of his lips. He had just completed another aperture, his total count now reaching 31. 31 apertures in 5 days. If not for the decoder Saint Rune, Ju Yuan would not have even dared to imagine such progress. But the mist essence has been used up, I'll have to go buy more. It's also time to return the jade strip, but it's a little unfortunate about the numerous experiences from the seniors and elders recorded inside. Looks like I'll need to borrow it again when needed. Ju Yuan began to calculate, and a pained look suddenly rose on his face. He had realized he now had less than 10 Genesis jade pieces remaining. All of his time had been spent on the ethereal form technique, and he had not visited the task pavilion nor taken on any assignments there. Hence, he naturally had no Genesis jade earnings. While Ju Yuan sighed, several figures flew over form far away, landing beside the creek. Ju Yuan lifted his head, discovering that it was Xiao Xiao, Xing Wanjin and the rest. Hey, little Yuan bro, you're living a little too relaxed. Xing Wanjin's oily face was filled with worry. Junior brother Ju Yuan, you're in really big trouble this time. Xiao Xiao let out a bitter laugh. How did you end up offending the instructor? They're after all inner mountain disciples, while we're merely tiny shrimps in comparison. Moreover, we have to rely on their guidance to learn our Genesis techniques. During the past 2 days, news that Ju Yuan had been shut out from all the instructor lessons had spread like wildfire. As a result, Xiao Xiao, Shen Wanjin and the rest were no longer able to sit still, and came rushing over. Ju Yuan did hear about it a little, but did not pay much attention to it. From his point of view, he currently did not need the guidance of those so-called inner mountain disciples. Junior brother Ju Yuan, maybe you should yield to senior brother Ju Yu. I'll go back and help you send him some gifts to see if we can resolve this matter. He thought very highly of Ju Yuan, and did not want him to end up being unable to learn any Genesis techniques due to a single impulsive clash that had led to Ju Yu sabotaging the former. Everyone was desperately trying to raise their strength during these 3 months, and learning Genesis techniques was one of utmost importance. If Ju Yuan were to be disadvantaged in this aspect, he would surely fall behind others in the peak selection ceremony 3 months later. Ju Yuan merely chuckled when he heard this, his impression of Xiao Xiao growing a little more favorable. After all, there were not many disciples who would even dare to approach him recently, let alone offer him a helping hand. He waved his hand and said, "Senior brother Xiao Xiao need not worry, I know what I'm doing." At the sight of Ju Yuan's expression, Xiao Xiao could only let out a bitter chuckle. He knew that though the young man before him seemed like a gentle person, he was in actuality very stubborn. Shen Wanjin was the most shrewd amongst the group, and thus knew what Ju Yuan currently lacked the most. Hence, he grinned and said, "Little Yuan bro, I see that you've been training hard these past few days and didn't really come out to accept any missions. So you should be almost out of Genesis jade pieces, right? If you need, we can loan you some." Ju Yuan thought for a bit, but ultimately shook his head. "No need for the time being. If it does come to that, I will go look for you guys. All right then, I'll be heading to the Hidden Scriptures house to return the Genesis technique jade strip." Ju Yuan smiled at the group, before he flew off into the sky atop his Genesis chi. As they watched him leave, Xiao Xiao, Shen Wanjin and the rest exchanged a look and sighed. They did not truly understand Ju Yuan's current situation, and thus were under the impression that he was just being stubborn. This is no good. If this continues, little Yuan bro will not be able to learn even a single Genesis technique after the 3 months are over. What will he have to show in the peak selection ceremony then? When Ju Yuan once again arrived at the Hidden Scriptures house, the passing disciples constantly swept their gazes towards him, gazes that were filled with pity. Ju Yuan's expression remained calm, as he proceeded to return the jade strip at the counter. Hee, isn't this Zhu Yuan? Have you learnt the ethereal form technique yet? At this moment, mocking laughter was heard from the side. Zhu Yuan turned his head, seeing Zhu Feng with several figures behind him, their eyes filled with a toying look as they watched the former. Evidently, Zhu Feng had received news the moment Zhu Yuan arrived, and thus brought several others to come watch. Zhu Yuan indifferently said, "I've not seen your elder brother recently, are the wound on his face still not healed?" By now, he already knew that Yao Yao had commanded Tunton to secretly attack Zhu Feng, an act that he could only secretly give a thumbs up to. Zhu Feng's expression turned rigid, a vicious look in his eyes as he glared at Zhu Yuan and said through gnashed teeth, "What's there to be proud of by relying on a beast?" Zhu Yuan smiled superficially as he retorted, "Are you saying that your elder brother is inferior to a beast?" You? Zhu Feng's eyes hardened as powerful Genesis Chi exploded from his body. He stared daggers at Zhu Yuan and threatened, "Do you want to die? This is the hidden scriptures house and fighting is prohibited here. Do all of you want to be punished?" A clear voice sounded from the side. They turned, only to realize Jiyu Hongi was frowning slightly as she watched them. Zhu Feng took in a deep breath, having no choice but to suppress the fury in his heart. Anger still colored his eyes as he glared at Zhu Yuan and said with a disdainful sneer, "Zhu Yuan, go ahead and continue to be so arrogant. There is no longer anyone who will guide you in your Genesis techniques. So just wait and see, your first-class disciple status will likely be gone soon." Zhu Yuan smiled and shook his head. "There's no need for you to worry. I'll see how long your stubbornness will last." Zhu Feng coldly snorted, before turning around and leaving with his group. The numerous disciples in the vicinity looked towards Zhu Yuan in pity before gradually scattering. Zhu Yuan paid no attention to them as he gave a slight nod to Jiyu Hongi, before beginning to head down the mountain. The main thing now was to figure out how to obtain Genesis Jade. Would he really have to take on missions too? Jiyu Hongi hesitated for a moment as she watched him leave, before suddenly catching up to him. "Zhu Yuan, you were too rash. How can you learn any Genesis techniques now that you've offended Zhu Yu? If you really are a capable person, you should know when to give in or exercise patience. There will always be a chance to turn things around in the future." Zhu Yuan was somewhat astonished by Jiyu Hongi's words. "You're worried about me?" Jiyu Hongi rolled her eyes at him and said, "This is called pity. I just don't want to see your talent being squandered away for no reason." Zhu Yu's actions are indeed somewhat petty. Zhu Yuan chuckled. He suddenly thought of something, rubbing his chin as he looked at Jiyu Hongi with interest. Jiyu Hongi felt a little uncomfortable under his gaze. Her pretty face immediately turned slightly hostile as she fiercely said, "What are you looking at?" Zhu Yuan asked, "How's your training been going at Zhu Yu's place?" The corners of Jiyu Hongi's red lips lifted slightly, somewhat pleased as she answered, "I've already unblocked my 10th aperture. I should be able to reach the first level of the ethereal form technique in a month." The 10th aperture. Zhu Yuan was taken aback. "Do you understand the benefits of having someone to guide you now? Did you think that 5 Genesis jade pieces were being spent in vain every day?" Jiyu Hongi looked at Zhu Yuan with a pitiful gaze. "Is it that easy to earn Genesis jade?" Zhu Yuan's eyes glowed. Jiyu Hongi's brows knitted together, somewhat unhappy, as she shot a look at Zhu Yuan and said in a disappointed manner, "I had thought that you would see the truth. Looks like there's really no saving you." She turned around as she spoke, intending to leave. However, Zhu Yuan hastily cut her off. Upon seeing her frown slightly, he hurriedly said, "If I have a method to let you master the first level of the ethereal form technique, and unblock more apertures than at Zhu Yu's place, would you be interested?" Jiyu Hongi was stunned. "What nonsense are you spouting, mastering the first level in 10 days? I've never heard of anyone who has managed to do so." Zhu Yuan smiled and said, "But what if it's true?" Jiyu Hongi pondered for a brief moment, before she replied, "Then I will naturally be interested. Genesis Jade is secondary, the most important thing is to save my time." This was clearly a wealthy little lady, someone who practically didn't care about Genesis Jade. She suspiciously looked at Zhu Yuan and asked, "Do you know someone who is better in the ethereal form technique than Zhu Yu?" Zhu Yuan grinned widely. "I do not know whether or not he's better than Zhu Feng, but his efficiency is definitely incomparable." "Who? If he can really let me reach the initial stage of the ethereal form technique, I am willing to learn from him. Genesis Jade is not a problem. Ji Hongyi stared at Zhu Yuan. Although she did not really believe him, he should not dare to joke about such a matter, right? Joy sprouted from between Zhu Yuan's brows as he pointed to himself with a smile. That person is me, of course. Come on, it'll be fighty Genesis jade pieces, you can pay half first. His voice grew smaller and smaller towards the end, because Ji Hongyi's pretty face had abruptly turned ice cold. She made a grabbing motion with her hand, as the scarlet red whip on her hip appeared within it. A fiendish look appeared on Ji Hongyi's pretty face, as she swung the whip. Zhu Yuan, I see that you're tired of living. To think that you even dare to make fun of me. The scarlet red whip was akin to a fire python, giving off searing Genesis chi undulations, as it swung down towards Zhu Yuan's skull. Zhu Yuan hastily dodged, causing the whip to narrowly miss his body and viciously smash into the ground, tearing open a long crack. Zhu Yuan sucked in a breath of cold air. That's too ruthless of you. This wasn't just a light smack on the face, but would likely leave a bloody scar. Ji Hongyi's hand jerked as the whip rolled back to her and wrapped around her wrist. She frostily glanced at Zhu Yuan and said, Zhu Yuan, do you really think that I won't? Zhu Yuan promptly shook his head at the sight of the somewhat angered Ji Hongyi and said with a forced smile, don't get so angry. I wasn't making fun of you. If you follow me, I can really allow you to achieve initial mastery of the ethereal form technique in 10 days. Ji Hongyi frowned so deeply that her eyebrows were almost vertical as she sneered, arrogance. How long has it been since you started learning the ethereal form technique? Have you even found any apertures? Although Zhu Yu's character is somewhat lacking, do you know how many apertures he has unblocked? 41 apertures. How can you compare to him? Zhu Yuan shook his head and said, only 41 apertures. After practicing for so long, Zhu Yu's talent is indeed quite mediocre. No wonder he's still a black/disciple. Shameless boasting. Ji Hongyi had reached the limits of her anger due to Zhu Yuan's attitude. He was clearly nowhere as good as others, and yet he stubbornly refused to admit they were better. She had originally been a little interested in the talent Zhu Yuan had displayed, but she was now exceedingly disappointed. No matter how good one's talent, if one was unable to realize one's faults, one would be able to walk far on the road of cultivation. Hence, she could no longer bother to stay a single second more, and began to turn around to leave. Upon seeing this, Zhu Yuan immediately said, I don't think you'll believe me if I told you I've already unblocked 31 apertures. How about this, why not you punch me once to see? 31 apertures. Ji Hongyi gnashed her teeth. It's only been 5 days and you've unblocked 31 apertures. Are you insulting my intelligence? Zhu Yuan's lips curled downwards. If not for the Genesis Jade, he would not bother explaining so much. He immediately extended a hand and beckoned. Quit being so wishy-washy, you'll know once you attack. Ji Hongyi laughed in anger. This was the first time she had heard others make such an assessment of her. Fine, I'll let you know the price of making fun of me. Ji Hongyi's hand clenched as vigorous Genesis Chi abruptly exploded from her body. Her Genesis Qi was fiery red, like a wave of fire. Zhu Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. Ji Hongyi was indeed a formidable individual, and was likely top tier even amongst the 3-layer Alpha Origin practitioners. In a real fight, even he would find her quite problematic. Ji Hongyi's foot pushed off the ground as her body shot forward. Surging Genesis Chi gathered towards her hand as a simple punch was sent blasting forth. Bang! The air was blasted away by the punch, seemingly causing a sonic boom. Ji Hongyi may look as delicate as a flower, but her attack was extremely simple and violent. A 2-layer Alpha Origin disciples were to face this seemingly small fist instead, he would likely be forced to his knees. However, Zhu Yuan did not move at all. He watched the fist winds blast towards him and suddenly took a step forward. His hand reached out, Genesis Chi surging, as he met Ji Hongyi's punch head-on. A muffled noise rang out as winds violently unfurled, blowing away the scattered rocks around them. However, the instant palm met fist, Ji Hongyi's face suddenly changed. She had felt a large portion of her power being neutralized when it surged towards Zhu Yuan. It felt as if most of her punch had landed on air. Ji Hongyi concentrated on Zhu Yuan's palm, only for her heart so shake violently. She had seen his palm seem to turn slightly incorporeal at this moment, giving off a faintly ethereal feeling. How can this be? Ji Hongyi could not help but cry out. She clearly understood that this was a sign that someone was about to reach the initial stage of the ethereal form technique. Only then would one be able to etherealize a part of their body, causing the power of any attack that landed on that part to be greatly neutralized. This was the essence of the ethereal form technique. When mastered, any attack that landed would feel as if it had struck air, causing a portion of its power to be neutralized. The fact that Zhu Yuan was able to etherealize his hand meant that his mastery of the ethereal form technique had already far surpassed her own. With the 10 apertures she had currently unblocked, achieving with a feat would be impossible. Zhu Yuan slowly withdrew his hand as it rapidly returned to normal, and let out a soft laugh of satisfaction. The ethereal form technique was marvelous indeed, and would greatly enhance his survivability once mastered. It was said that the first level would bestow upon one the ability to temporarily etherealize any part of the body. This would be an invaluable skill indeed to counter any sudden or sneak attacks. At the second level, one would be able to etherealize the entire body, making one akin to the mists. As for the third level, it was even more amazing. One would be capable of full etherealization, giving one the ability to merge with the world around. From a certain point of view, it could be said to be invisibility that could also avoid others' detection. Overall, the ethereal form technique was a wonderful technique, could pretty much cover every aspect of survivability, from defense to escaping and hiding. This was also why Zhu Yuan had not hesitated to choose it the moment he saw it. Ji Yu Hongyi blankly stared at Zhu Yuan, not knowing what to see for a time. What had just happened was way too shocking. She was unable to believe that Zhu Yuan was nearly at the initial stage after a mere 5 days of practice. You've really unblocked 31 apertures. Zhu Yuan chuckled. You should at least believe your own eyes, right? How did you do it? Zhu Yuan smiled faintly. Perhaps my sensing is just better, how about it? Are you interested? I should be able to guarantee you reaching the first level of the ethereal form technique in 10 days. He did not dare to make any guarantees for the second level, because he could already feel how increasingly difficult it was becoming to sense the latter apertures. Even with the decoder Saint Rune, it would take some time. Ji Yu Hongyi's eyes flickered brightly as she stared at Zhu Yuan. She had originally been under the impression that he was spouting nonsense. Who could have expected that he would be so capable? Even without anyone's guidance, he had rapidly progressed at such an astonishing speed. This is 50 Genesis jade pieces. Ji Yu Hongyi was a swift and decisive person. Since she had already personally witnessed it, there was naturally no need to delay. With a flick of her wrist, a cloth bag was thrown towards Zhu Yuan, the clear tinkling of Genesis jade pieces clearly heard as it flew through the air. How generous! Zhu Yuan raised his thumb in response. She was indeed a rishy little lady, not even a single grumble before paying the full amount. To think that he was originally planning on only taking half the payment first. But where did you get so many Genesis jade pieces? Zhu Yuan curiously asked. He had not seen Ji Yu Hongyi undertake any missions, and yet she seemed to be very wealthy. Why be such a busybody? Ji Yu Hongyi rolled her eyes at him. Zhu Yuan nodded in understanding. As expected, she did have ties in the sect. Zhu Yuan, I'm warning you that my money is not so easily earned. If I do not reach the first level after 10 days. Ji Yu Hongyi shot a look at Zhu Yuan. I will not let you off. Relax, this is already a bargain, and I will not cheat anyone. Zhu Yuan hurriedly pledged. This was his first customer, and he had to make sure she was satisfied at all costs. When do we begin training? Our time is precious, so we'll of course be starting now. Follow me. Zhu Yuan waved his hand, tossing the bag of Genesis jade in the other as he walked down the mountain. Ji Yu Hongyi looked at his leaving figure, before looking towards the lecture halls in the rear mountain, as she hesitated for a moment. In the end, she gritted her teeth and quickly caught up. Zhu Yuan, you're dead meat if you dare to lie to me. Rear mountain, lecture hall. Zhu Yu watched the numerous outer mountain disciples arrive one after another and suddenly frowned. He had not seen Ji Yu Hongyi amongst them. At this moment, Zhu Feng suddenly rushed over, his expression extremely ugly. Zhu Yu frowned and asked, what is it? The other disciples also looked over. Zhu Feng hesitated for a second, somewhat unable to believe his own words as he explained, Ji Yu Hongyi sent someone to say that she will not be coming. Not coming? Zhu Yu was taken aback, somewhat unhappy as she said, wasn't she doing well so far? Does she no longer plan on learning the ethereal form technique? Jiyu Hongyi was from a powerful background, while also being very pretty. Hence, Jiyu had some designs on her, and was currently attempting to fulfill the dream of marrying into power and wealth, hoping to make use of this opportunity while teaching her to get into her good books. Jiyu Hongyi's sudden absence had disrupted his tempo. Zhu Feng summoned his courage and said, She's still learning, but she has went to learn from Zhu Yuan. The lecture hall immediately fell silent, numerous disciples looking to each other first before quickly breaking out into a din. Zhu Yuan. Jiyu Hongyi is learning the ethereal from technique from Zhu Yuan. What the heck is she doing? Zhu Yu was also stupefied. Soon after, his complexion turned steely green with rage. He was truly unable to comprehend what Jiyu Hongyi was thinking. Did she sustain some brain damage? It was preposterous for her to learn Genesis techniques from another outer mountain disciple. What kind of medicine had Zhu Yuan given her? Most importantly, if news of this spread, where would Zhu Yu be able to hide his face? Zhu Yu gnashed his teeth, no longer able to restrain his emotions. He violently kicked a nearby table to dust, his expression twisting as he roared, Zhu Yuan, you're practically asking for death. Zhu Yu raged in the hall, his twisted expression causing the outer mountain disciples to keep silent out of fear. Zhu Yu was undoubtedly akin to a volcano on the verge of eruption at this moment. Although Zhu Yu was seeing red, he still retained some of his rationality, and soon took in a deep breath. He knew that if an inner mountain disciple like himself were to lash out at Zhu Yuan in a fit of rage for no real reason, it would be a violation of the rules. Of course, the most important factor was the extremely powerful mysterious little creature at Zhu Yuan's side, which was in no way weaker than himself. Even if he did try something, it would likely not end well for him. Zhu Yu's anger gradually returned to calmness, though his face remained stormy. He looked at the crowd of disciples and flatly said, continue your training. This is Jiyu Hongyi's personal decision, so no one can interfere. I do hope that this great master she has found will be able to help her advance by leaps and bounds. At this point, everyone could hear the hint of ridicule in his voice. Evidently, he felt that Jiyu Hongyi was asking for trouble. It was hard to believe that she had become so muddle-headed because of Zhu Yuan. The other disciples nodded one after another, though a puzzled look remained in their eyes. Why has Jiyu Hongyi chosen to learn from Zhu Yuan? Could she be interested in him? However, these words were immediately rebutted in a clearly saw manner. How can that be possible? Who do you think Jiyu Hongyi is? How can she possibly fancy that country bumpkin? Then why did she do that? This? Everyone looked at each other, unable to think of an answer. Zhu Feng tried to pacify Zhu Yu. Don't worry, elder brother, when Jiyu Hongyi returns to her senses, she will realize Zhu Yuan's true colors. When that happens, she will definitely return. Zhu Yu coldly snorted as he uncaringly said, it is her choice, so she'll bear the consequences. If she continued under my tutelage, with her talent, she would have mastered the first level of the ethereal form technique in a month. He shook his head, as if feeling that it was such a pity. But who could have imagined that she would choose to ruin her own future? I do want to see how much she will be able to learn from Zhu Yuan. Humph, if word of this matter spreads to the ears of that elder of Jiyu Hongyi's, that person will not forgive Zhu Yuan. A mocking angle seemed to be hooked up from the corners of Zhu Yu's lips, as if he could already see Zhu Yuan's tragic fate. By a certain creek in the mountain, Zhu Yuan stood on a rock, gazing at the young lady in red before him and inquired, you've completed the 10th aperture of the ethereal form technique. Jiyu Hongyi nodded, her shapely brows knitting together slightly as she responded, but it's getting harder and harder to sense them the more apertures I find. I've already spent an entire day trying, but I've yet to sense the 11th aperture. She suspiciously looked at Zhu Yuan and asked, so how will you help me? Sit down. Zhu Yuan pointed to a rock. Jiyu Hongyi sat down with her back straight. Her red clothes wrapped around her full curves that extended all the way to her waist as her chest stealthily rose and fell. Zhu Yuan also sat down in front of her. Stretch out your hands. Jiyu Hongyi glared at Zhu Yuan, her eyes a little cold. Zhu Yuan helplessly sighed. Can you just listen to me? Jiyu Hongyi snorted softly, as she glared daggers at Zhu Yuan. If I find out that you're trying to take advantage of me, I will not let you off. After finishing, she extended her hands, palms facing Zhu Yuan. The corners of Zhu Yuan's lips curled slightly downwards as he also extended his hands, placing them against Jiyu Hongyi's. A slight cooling sensation spread from their touching palms, causing Ji Hongyi's heart to tremble a little. Although she was viciously glaring at Ju Yuan, a blush had risen on her face. Ju Yuan closed his eyes and said, "Circulate the ethereal form technique." Only upon seeing that Ju Yuan was seemingly no trying anything funny did Ji Hongyi forcibly attempt to ignore the uncomfortable feeling from her palms. She shut her eyes, willing herself into calmness, before beginning to direct her Genesis Chi along the ethereal form training route. Genesis Chi began to flow, circulating round after round. Ji Hongyi also began to sense the location of the 11th aperture. Ju Yuan activated the decoder Saint rune, sending its power searching in Ji Hongyi's body. Water flowed in the creek, while two figures sat facing each other. The atmosphere was rather peaceful. An incense stick of time stealthily passed as Ji Hongyi gradually became somewhat disappointed. She was still unable to find the 11th aperture. After some hesitation, she decided to leave her cultivation state. It was at this moment, however, that Ju Yuan's voice was transmitted into her ears. "Don't be distracted and do not resist. I will soon begin guiding your Genesis Chi." Ji Hongyi frowned deeply, somewhat hesitant. Allowing someone else to guide one's Genesis Chi was extremely dangerous. If the other party had any ill intentions, he could cause havoc with the Genesis Chi, a situation which may even result in one's channels being damaged. Ju Yuan seemed to know what was on Ji Hongyi's, and hence did not rush her, but instead patiently waited for her answer. After all, there was nothing he could do without her cooperation. He could understand Ji Hongyi's hesitation. If he was in her place, he too would not easily allow someone else to direct the flow of Genesis Chi in his body. This silence lasted for a few dozen breaths, before Ju Yuan suddenly felt the Genesis Chi in Ji Hongyi's body slow down, as if control had been withdrawn. "Ju Yuan, let's see whether you're a liar or someone who truly has ability." Ji Hongyi's calm voice sounded. She was a decisive person. Since she had already chosen to place her faith in Ju Yuan, there was naturally no reason to hesitate anymore. However, if he was lying to her, she would let him know what kind of price there was to pay. Ju Yuan secretly sighed in admiration of Ji Hongyi's decisiveness. Without further ado, he began to direct the Genesis Chi in her body. Genesis Chi flowed along her channels, suddenly speeding up a split second later, as it prepared to charge towards a certain point in her body. Ji Hongyi's body tensed up at this moment, her heart beating rapidly. A faint sound was heard. Next, a stunned Ji Hongyi felt an aperture being forced open in a certain part of her body. The moment this aperture appeared, the previous 10 apertures she had unblocked began to vibrate in resonance. This response, the answer was already clear, she had found the 11th aperture. Ju Yuan had actually succeeded. Ji Hongyi's heart was filled with shock. To think that what she had been unable to accomplish with an entire day of hard work had been completed by Ju Yuan so quickly. How had he done it? Ji Hongyi was so astonished that she even forgot to begin the next step of polishing the aperture. "You'll have to polish the aperture yourself, I won't be able to help you in this segment." Only when Ju Yuan's voice sounded in her ears did Ji Hongyi return to her senses. She hurriedly began circulating her Genesis Chi, sending wisp after wisp into the aperture to polish it. Ju Yuan withdrew his hands, secretly breathing a sigh of relief, as he watched Genesis Chi rise around Ji Hongyi. It was fortunate that he had succeeded, or it would not have ended well for him given Ji Hongyi's temper. 50 Genesis Jade pieces, looks like I can continue to purchase Mist Essence, but it's a pity I still can't afford to rent out the 9 Dragons cannon from the Hidden Scriptures house. It seems that I'll have to work harder. Ju Yuan sighed inside. Ji Hongyi was finally done 2 hours later, the 11th aperture in her body fully polished, before being infused with Mist Essence, allowing her to take another step forward towards the first level of the ethereal form technique. Her long eyelashes trembled faintly as she slowly opened her eyes. Ju Yuan stood on a rock to her front, and was currently looking at her. "How is it? You should believe that I'm not a liar now, right?" Ju Yuan chuckled. Ji Hongyi blushed slightly, a somewhat complicated expression in her eyes, as she looked towards Ju Yuan. A long while later, she finally responded, "How did you do it?" Ju Yuan offhandedly said, "My senses are just above average." Ji Hongyi did not probe any further. After a slight hesitation, she finally said in a soft voice, "Thanks." She knew that she was the big winner this time. Ju Yuan had greatly increased her efficiency, something that Ju Yu would never be able to achieve. Ju Yuan waved his hand. You provided the money and I provided the effort. Each of us is just fulfilling the other's needs. It's getting late. You may find me here during the next 10 days. I'll do my best to let you reach the first level of the ethereal form technique before these 10 days are over. After he finished speaking, he waved as he turned and left in a carefree manner, leaving only the sight of his back. Ji Hongi watched him leave as she bit her red lips. It was a long time later before she finally mumbled to herself in a soft voice. This guy does have a little ability after all. In the following few days, having tasted the sweet fruits of success, Ji Hongi came by the creek practically every day to receive Ju Yuan's aid in mastering the ethereal form technique. With Ju Yuan's help, she progressed by leaps and bounds. In a short 4 days, the number of apertures she had unblocked rose from 10 to 25. One must know that the later apertures would become harder and harder to sense. In a normal situation, Ji Hongi would at best unblock 5 apertures in 4 days. The rapid progress under Ju Yuan's guidance slightly alarmed even Ji Hongi herself. Hence, even someone as prideful as her was now a little more respectful when she saw Ju Yuan during these few days. However, Ju Yuan did not pay much heed to her change in attitude. After all, the Genesis Jade he wanted was already his. The only thing that bothered him was that this tiny amount of Genesis Jade was still nowhere near enough to rent out the high-grade Little Heaven Tier 9 Dragon's Cannon. A creek flowed within a mountain. Ju Yuan was seated on a rock, his eyes shut in cultivation, while Ji Hongi was also present nearby. Ju Yuan suddenly opened his eyes as he slowly expelled a breath of white qi from his mouth. At this moment, a peculiar undulation spread from his body. One could only watch as half his body gradually turned incorporeal, giving off a faint feeling of transparency. You've mastered the first level. A shocked voice sounded from the side. Ji Hongi had opened her eyes, and was now staring at Ju Yuan in astonishment. Etherealizing half one's body was only achievable when one reached the first level of the ethereal form technique. Ju Yuan's expression did not change as he swept her a look and said, "You've already completed 25 apertures. Is it that strange for me to reach the first level?" Ji Hongi froze momentarily, feeling a little foolish due to how shocked she was. When she thought about it, however, she felt that it was a very normal reaction. It was after all far too rare for someone to reach the first level in such a short span of time. Now that I've mastered the first level, any attack that lands on my body will have its power neutralized by nearly 30%. A satisfied look filled his eyes as he looked at his etherealized hand. Do not look down on this 30%, because it would often be enough to bring about a reversal in battle. Of course, the neutralization effect was not absolute, and there existed certain special methods that could counter it. If not, the ethereal form technique would not be limited to a mere mid-grade Little Heaven Genesis technique, but instead be qualified to enter the ranks of even the true Heaven tier. All in all, the ethereal form technique would greatly boost one's survivability on all fronts. You're actually pretty low-key. Ji Hongi suddenly laughed as she looked at Ju Yuan. Although you appear to be a first-layer alpha origin, after spending these past few days with you, I've come to realize that you should have a place amongst the recently established Outer Mountains top 10. Nearly half a month had passed since the many disciples arrived at the Zhangshuan sect. The acclimatization period was basically over for everyone, causing them to naturally shift their attention to competing and comparing. As such, after some estimation and general consensus, the Outer Mountain disciples came up with the so-called 10 Great Outer Mountain Disciples. It had spread like wildfire during the past 2 days, making it one of the hottest topics in the Outer Mountains. The one who stood at the top was to no one's surprise, Lu Feng. While Ji Hongi was second. Amongst the 10 Great Outer Mountain Disciples, 7 were geniuses from the Xingju continent, while only 3 were from the other continents, and it just so happened that Xiao Xiu was number 10. As for Ju Yuan, no one had even mentioned him. He was after all a first-layer alpha origin, and there appeared to be just too huge of a gap between him and the third-layer alpha origin disciples. However, Ji Hongi was clearly not of the same opinion, hence her previous words. From what she could see, Ju Yuan was too good at concealing his strength. If he wanted to, he would surely have a place amongst the 10 Great Outer Mountain Disciples. Ju Yuan mere chuckled when he heard this. Is there any meaning to these rankings? It's not the peak selection ceremony will be decided based on it. He was indeed not the slightest bit interested in it. After all, the higher one was ranked, the more humiliating it would be if one ended up being unable to match up in the peak selection ceremony. Moreover, it was preposterous that Yao Yao had not even been included in the 10 great outer mountain disciples, a fact that only made Zhu Yuan look down on its weight. He knew that if Yao Yao were to act, even Lu Feng would not be her match. Jiyu Hongyi frowned slightly. We're all youngsters, if we don't have aspirations, we won't have drive. How then will we aim for even greater heights? You're the weird one, so young and yet so similar to an old man. Zhu Yuan could only helplessly roll his eyes. Can't I not be a part of your pointless rankings? Oh? Just as Zhu Yuan was about to speak, he suddenly sensed something and lifted his head towards a certain direction where the sound of rushing wind could be heard. A figure hurriedly flew over, his round, fat figure making it painfully apparently as to who it was. It was naturally Shen Wanjin. Shen Wanjin was currently dripping with sweat. The moment he caught sight of Zhu Yuan, he hastily shouted, "Little Yuan bro, Zhu Feng is heading here with several others. They don't look friendly at all." Zhu Feng. Zhu Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed that the two brothers had finally reached their limits. He knew that it was impossible for Zhu Yu to silently sit by when Zhu Yuan had snatched Jiyu Hongyi away. "Is Zhu Yu amongst them?" asked Zhu Yuan. If Zhu Yu was coming too, Zhu Yuan would have to go bring Tunton over. After all, a good man would not purposely suffer for no reason. No matter how arrogant he was, he would not directly face an inner mountain disciple like Zhu Yu when he was only at the first layer alpha origin stage. Nope. Shen Wanjin shook his head. Zhu Yuan let out a carefree laugh. If Zhu Yu's wasn't coming, a mere Zhu Feng would not be able to cause any trouble. Shen Wanjin only grew even more worried at the sight of Zhu Yuan's carefree appearance. Though Zhu Feng was not part of the newly crowned 10 great outer mountain disciples, he was still above average amongst the first-class disciples, his strength far surpassing Han Shan's. While they conversed, the sound of rushing wind had already approached the entrance to the mountain. Zhu Yuan soon saw a dozen figures fly over, landing a short distance from the creek. The one leading the group was naturally Zhu Feng. Zhu Feng stared at Zhu Yuan with hostility as he frostily said, "Zhu Yuan, I do not know what kind of honeyed words you used to scam junior sister Jiyu Hongyi, but I advise you to stop with your tricks, because you will not be able to bear the responsibility of affecting her training." Jiyu Hongyi's pretty face immediately turned ice cold as she angrily said, "Zhu Feng, what does where I train have to do with you? You'd better get lost." Her bright eyes icily looked towards Zhu Feng and Gang, causing them to stumble slightly in response. However, Zhu Feng was not scared off by this, summoning his courage as he said, "Junior sister Hongyi, we're doing this for your sake. You should not listen to this guy's flowery words." Jiyu Hongyi's anger turned to laughter. "Flowery words? Do you fools know what level I've reached while practicing the ethereal form technique with him? I've already unblocked 25 apertures. If I were to continue under Zhu Yu instead, I don't think I'll even reach 15, right?" Zhu Feng's expression changed slightly, while the other disciples looked towards Jiyu Hongyi in disbelief as they involuntarily cried out, 25. How can that be? However, they knew that someone like Jiyu Hongyi would never lower herself to lie to them. Could Zhu Yuan really be so capable? Zhu Feng's expression fluctuated indeterminately. Soon after, he looked towards Zhu Yuan in contempt and said, "All of us know how talented junior sister Hongyi is, so it's not surprising for her to accomplish this in a few days. But I'm afraid you don't have the qualifications to take credit for her success." His words were clear, insinuating that Jiyu Hongyi's amazing talent was the only reason for her accomplishments, and had nothing to do with Zhu Yuan. Jiyu Hongyi's earlier words were merely her trying to defend him. The others inwardly nodded upon hearing this, finding this the more acceptable explanation. After all, they would rather believe in Jiyu Hongyi's astonishing talent than a mere first-layer alpha origin having such capability. Jiyu Hongyi was so frustrated that she no longer knew what to say. The brains of these people were too good at coming up with bullshit. Just as she was about to begin scolding again, Zhu Yuan stopped her with an outreached hand. Zhu Yuan helplessly said, "It is useless for you to reason with them." Jiyu Hongyi glared at Zhu Yuan. Why would she bother if not for him? When you encounter such people, there's no need to talk too much. Zhu Yuan grinned at Jiyu Hongyi as something seemed to slowly climb up in his eyes. "Didn't you say something about me earlier? I recall you saying I'm like an old man, right? It's just drive, I do have some too." His gaze turned towards Zhu Feng and the rest, his grin widening with a hint of blade-like iciness. "Aren't you guys here to stir up trouble? Come then, you guys are just a bunch of trash anyways. Shall I take on all of you alone, or do you guys want to come at me together? I leave the choice to you." At the final word, Zhu Yuan's expression turned completely cold as ice, berserk Genesis chi abruptly erupting from his body like a storm. Behind him, a strange splendor appeared in Ji Hongyi's eyes, as she gazed at the now overbearing young man, who gave off an incomparably pressuring aura. It was as if the current Zhu Yuan and the gentle young man, who usually taught her, were two completely different people. Genesis chi violently swept out from Zhu Yuan's body, rapidly swirling around him like a golden hurricane, as his aura steadily rose. In front of him, Zhu Feng and Gang were first stunned by Zhu Yuan's sudden change, but upon hearing his words, every one of them began to see red. "He, you truly are arrogant." Zhu Feng laughed angrily, his eyes filled with ridicule, as he disdainfully said, "Taking us all on alone. Who do you think you are? Do you really believe that defeating Han Shan has given you the qualifications to show such arrogance in the face of real first-class disciples like us?" The faces of Zhu Feng and Gang were filled with amusement and contempt, evidently feeling that Zhu Yuan was truly a joke. After all, Zhu Yuan was merely a first-layer alpha origin in their eyes. Though his feat of defeating Han Shan in a single punch had been pretty shocking, it was really nothing to be proud of to Zhu Feng and the rest. Han Shan was only a second-class disciple, his strength merely at the second-layer alpha origin. Hence, Zhu Yuan's current appearance was extremely comical to them, as if they were looking at a clown. Zhu Feng's laughter continued for quite some time, before finally coming to a halt. He was actually pretty happy that Zhu Yuan had voluntarily jumped out. After all, the former had indeed come here today to cause trouble. Even if Zhu Yuan had not voluntarily spoken up earlier, Zhu Feng would not easily let the matter rest. "You can forget all of us ganging up on you, it is far too shameful." Zhu Feng shook his head, a sliver of iciness rising in his eyes as he looked towards Zhu Yuan and said, "Your flowery words are useless against me, so I will be using my fists to reveal your true colors in front of junior sister Hongyi." He took a step forward as powerful Genesis chi abruptly burst out from his body, the full might of the third-layer alpha origin undoubtedly on full display. By the side, Shen Wanjin was intimidated by Zhu Feng's pressure, causing his expression to change slightly as worry emerged in his eyes. Zhu Feng was after all pretty famous amongst the first-class disciples. Seeing that a fight was about to break out, Shen Wanjin's gaze kept darting towards the outside of the mountain. The sound of rushing wind was suddenly heard at this moment, rapidly approaching the creek as a cold and stern shout rang out, "Zhu Feng, if you plan on taking on junior brother Zhu Yuan, you'll have to first ask for my permission." This video will end here.